Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with the Average Joe Sports Show, the year in review with the Average Joes.
I'm Gary Sharp. We'll talk some football, of course, because it is a huge month for Nebraska when it comes to building future rosters.
Hey, it's Bill Doleman. The Nebraska baseball team season wrapped up. Disappointing trip to Stillwater, but a great season nonetheless, winning 40 games for the first time since 2014.
And it's Elijah Herbel here. We'll finish this show off by giving out the first ever Above Average Joe Sports Show Award, so stick around for that.
Welcome to it. It's the Average Joe Sports Show, back and reunited, episode 43. Make sure you like and follow the AJ Sports Pod on Twitter, and the Average Joe Sports Show can find it on YouTube. Like and subscribe there. Also, Spotify and iTunes. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Fellas, it's good to huddle back up. How we feeling?
Yippee-ki-yay. It's good to see everybody. We have our own version of ESPN's squeeze play. We have the Average Joe quad box.
There you go. And one of the things I'm coming to today is, can we believe that it's another Husker athletic year in the books? Like, fully? I know they had the night at the lead, like, what was that, a month ago, and like finals are all done, but like, I don't know, this year really seemed to fly by for me. Maybe that's just getting older. I've heard that tends to happen the older you get, but it's wild that this started off with, I mean, you go back to Nebraska, Minnesota, the Jeff Sims experience. That seems like it was not as long ago as it was, and here we are preparing ourselves for another summer and then another fall.
Not long
camp.
enough.
Hey, don't you guys think, and we kind of talked about this a couple of months ago, the success of Nebraska men's basketball and how long we paid attention to basketball and the fact that they played the NCAA tournament kind of sped things up, because we really didn't dive into spring football. And I know spring football started a little bit later this year. We didn't really start diving into spring football until it was actually started. So I think that also helped with making it go. It seemed like it went really fast. I agree with you, Elijah. And you know what? That's not just an old thing. All right. I mean, time flies when you're having fun.
That's
and
true.
as the representative of the three olds on this quad box, we're just having a good time.
And there was a lot of fun to be had across a lot of Husker sports this year. To add to that, there was intrigue with basketball, as you said, intrigue with baseball late in the season. Nebraska had the month of October in football, and the volleyball team making a run to the national title game. It was a good year for Husker sports. I know a bowl game would have been the cherry on top. You didn't get that, but just kind of weird that, man, it's another year in the books, and I'm another year older.
But, the way it ends, too, with the baseball team not having a great trip to Stillwater. Did get a win, wasn't 2-Q, but with what baseball did in Omaha, that was a pretty significant way to wrap up. Look, I can't think of a year with so many twists and turns. I mean, from the start of of volleyball and the Jeff Sims experience, as you put it. And all that Nebraska football put fans and observers through. Volleyball was that constant in the fall. And then basketball with, are they going to make it? Are they not going to make it? Are they going to make it? Are they not going to make it? And then, women's basketball had a good year. I mean, we're going to talk more about the year in total, but I think for baseball, obviously, but I think for the whole athletic department in the year, for baseball to win in Omaha, have a dog pile, regardless of what happened in Stillwater, in front of no fans other than Husker fans, that's a pretty good way to wrap up the 23-24 academic athletic year.
Also, and don't you guys also think this? Like, there were moments, you started with 92,000 people watching volleyball in a football stadium, and you kind of finished with a dog pile at the downtown ballpark in Omaha. Is that 23-24 athletic season in Lincoln, which it seemed to right the ship because you feel a little bit better? There really are not any programs where you're like, it's trending in the wrong direction as you get ready for the offseason, and then you turn around and kick it back up in August. I mean, that's pretty impressive. Kind of a quick turnaround in Nebraska athletics because, man, it was not just football. A couple of years ago, it was dire. across the board.
Look, I don't want to come down on Paul Klempa and the women's bowling team, but it's not the same kind of success as the Bill Stroud era. All right, finishing as the runner-up at the NCAA regionals, not what Nebraska bowling is used to. Again, I'm a big Paul Klempa fan. I think that women's bowling program is gonna have reach the heights again. But when you see regional final runner-up, that's not kind of what we're used to. That's not. Yeah,
rifle. Right, Bill, I'm right there with you. I mean, I think that's probably a discussion that's got to be had about where bowling is going. But rifle wasn't as good as they've been in the past.
But as programs go down, did you guys see the Nebraska Esports Rocket League team reverse sweep of Purdue? As one giant fades, another giant rises. Can I also say
well done.
One more thing to kind of note that friends have texted me about, but as I put things in perspective, in the moment it sucks, but you look back, as Schmidt has just left us completely briefly, and we leave a box open for those that are watching on the YouTube channel. Bye, Schmidt. It's kind of nice for a change, once you get a little bit out of the moment, to think about what it means to have heartbreak as somebody who follows Husker sports, because a lot of seasons ended in seemingly heartbreak. With Husker football, so close to a bowl game in the month of November happens, and there's heartbreak there. You have the Husker volleyball team following in the national championship. You have the Husker basketball team making it to the NCAA tournament, and you think this is the year they finally win one, and Texas A&M rips their soul right out. You have Husker baseball advancing to a regional, and you think they have momentum going into that, maybe they have a chance, and then they get absolutely gorilla balled by Florida. They didn't get to see Oklahoma State, but Oklahoma State I feel like probably would have done the same. And one more to add to it, you have all the offseason hype with Husker softball, with Jordy Ball coming in, the homegrown Husker coming back, and you think maybe rising or taking them to a regional, super regional, a women's college World Series, and that ends in heartbreak with her injury. But it is nice, I guess, in a way, that there was enough hope around Husker Athletics this year that seasons did end in heartbreak, because as painful as some of those were, that is a welcome change after so many years of just mediocrity and fans not caring, fans checking out. You didn't have to care about Husker basketball after Christmas. You didn't have to care about Husker football once you got into November. Though the seasons didn't end how a lot of Husker fans wanted, I think it is a welcome change that there was enough of a care level within Husker fans, among Husker fans, that there was some heartbreak to be had.
Guys, you had success on different fields of play. And to echo Elijah, that's been different. And I think we feel that it's going to be a string of successful seasons. So the way Amy has the basketball program rolling, Fred got to the tournament, got to do some reconstruction, but it's looking okay. You have a couple of guys coming back that are big. Baseball, we've touched on. We'll get into more down in Stillwater in a moment. And then football, from a recruiting and a development standpoint, the excitement's ramping up nationally, locally. There's some smiles with that schedule. And, volleyball is still the standard to meet, and good luck beating because of what John Cook has done. So pretty good. Let's dive in to Nebraska baseball. Really listened well to Will Bolt's post game. He wasn't happy with how it finished. None of them are. But what a run they had to get positioned well in Stillwater, and just not enough complimentary ball, Sharpie, with getting some outs after you jump out, you get a lead, you come back with another 2-run shot, and then the weather delay wasn't good, and then the bullpen came in and had some problems. And Florida's damn good. We'll say that as well.
Yeah, and they proved that by winning that regional. I mean, they could have easily been, a 2 seed, but because of their record, they would drop down to a 3 seed. And Nebraska had a plan. I think the whole regional in Stillwater was kind of a microcosm of Nebraska's season. Nebraska was good. They weren't great. They had moments. They were resilient. When they would lose a game, it didn't turn into a 2 or 3 game losing streak. They found a way. They had certain guys that got hot at the right time or were consistent throughout the entire season, if they were Sears or McConaughey. I think it was a successful season. It was a good season. Not a great season, good season. But I think it is a good season because it gives you a place to start for 2025. And I think Nebraska's in a good spot, and their roster's going to look a little bit different. But for the most part, the key guys are coming back, except for the Big Ten Pitcher of the Year because he's out of eligibility. But you need to, moving forward after that experience in Stillwater, is every time you put your head down on the pillow between now and the beginning of next season, you have to figure out your ultimate goal is, how do I construct my roster and my schedule so that we are hosting a regional? Because it's now 19 years since Nebraska's gotten out of the regional, and that has to be the goal next year. Because I think the inner workings are fine. It's, can they accumulate enough talent to host a regional? They're not going to be able to construct a roster to go toe-to-toe with the SEC. You're going to need intangibles, whether it be great out of the dugout. But I think they've got a baseline where they can build in 2025, and I think they've got some momentum. It's just kind of going back to our previous discussion about what Elijah and Bill said, and also you, Schmidt, about Nebraska athletics. There have been many times where a Nebraska athletic program has had a good season, and you get excited, and you might buy a season ticket, and you're staring at the roster, and you're following the recruiting, and then it's a letdown the next year. They don't make the Big Ten tournament. They don't make the NCAA tournament. You're like, we got to start over. I think that's something Nebraska's got some momentum and something that they can build on as they go into 2025.
Step one for next year, eliminate midweek games. Just throw them to the side. You don't need them.
Just recruit one pitcher for midweek games only. You're not going to see the weekend. You're only pitching on Tuesday or Wednesday.
Wouldn't if Nebraska's able to turn the corner on their midweek success, wouldn't that give you a better feel for their NCAA hopes? Because that basically would mean that they have built up depth in the on the staff, and they've probably built up their back end of the bullpen, which is very much lacking. When you're a Big Ten school and you get to the third game of a regional and you're on that number 3 starter or some arms have been worn out, you have the big crooked numbers that the 3 Big Ten teams had yesterday. So, I think if they can turn things around in the midweek, that gives me hope. I mean, they were close this year. I mean, guys, they were to the middle of April, and they were still being considered to host a regional. So it can be done, but you got to correct what happens in the midweek. You can't be losing to summer league teams. I mean, that's just not acceptable at all.
And depth is, as you said, hard to build in the Big Ten, because I do feel like Nebraska this year, I know last year you had Anderson, Max Anderson, I should say, and Bryce Matthews, 2 guys that I think could have played on a lot of college baseball rosters in America. And I think you even added to that this year. Sears was a guy that I know he didn't have his best stuff against Florida, but he was still able to hold them below their season runs average. And I think as you saw on Sunday, that was a roster that is really, really hard to keep to just 5 runs in a baseball game. So you have Sears, you have McConaughey. I think McConaughey would have been a starter a lot of places. Guys like Swanson and Karen. I'll add Wordley out of the bullpen. He turned himself into a guy who I think a lot of bullpens in America would have liked to have had. It's just whenever you run up against Florida, who has guys that can hit 1 through 9 and pitchers that are throwing in the high 90s, and even a guy that's pitched limited innings so far this year is coming in on a day 3 guy and throwing high 90s. And I know he didn't have his best stuff either, but that's kind of the difference between Nebraska and the rest of America right now is that drop off between your top level guys and your guys that are filling out the roster. And that's going to be a tough hill to climb if you're Coach Bolt, but you look at some of the younger faces that are on this roster and guys that we're going to assume are going to be back next season, some faces you can pick up in the transfer portal. I think there was some momentum that you can build on for this year that you would hope can help, because he's shown to me at least, Will Bolt, that he can recruit and develop at a level that will take you near the top of the Big Ten. I know he had some struggles with it in the past 2 years, but this was the year his own fully constructed roster. It required some development, but it proved to me that he can build a roster that will compete and win a Big Ten title. It's about sustainability and in those small little adjustments in order to get yourself a couple more guys that can take you to a place where you can go out there and actually compete in a regional. Once you can compete in a regional, then you can talk about hosting a regional.
But, the key is sustaining that roster. And, Gary Gilmore, the outgoing coach, it's Gary Gilmore, right? The outgoing coach at Coastal Carolina, wrapped up his career there, talked about how much he loves his team. But then on the way out the door, much kind of like Nick Saban on a much smaller scale, talking about the problems of trying to put together and keep and maintain a roster at a high level. They won a national championship there. And he's saying, look, I'm going to miss my guys, but I am not going to miss the reconstruction, the recruiting, and the NIL and all those things that it takes to maintain your team now. Yeah, can Will Bolt put together a roster of Will Bolts like he did this year? Yeah. That was a team that, put together the first 40-win season at Nebraska since 2014, and only the second in the last 15 or more years. So yes, you talk about players who are coming back, but are they? Is Nebraska baseball going to be able to have the same minimal turnover that Matt Rule appears to be fostering with the football program, where it's only a couple of guys? Or is Will Bolt still in the process of going to have to bring in 6 or 7 new players that are going to play significant and key roles year after year after year until things stabilize? This is still Big Ten baseball. How much will USC and UCLA and Oregon and Washington change the complexion of that? And will there now have to be a greater investment in baseball throughout the Big Ten to match what those 4 Pac-12 schools are going to be bringing to the league? If that's the case, I think Nebraska's in. If there's going to be an investment that needs to be made in baseball, I think Nebraska is one of the programs in the Big Ten that will say, all right, we'll match whatever those guys are bringing because we want in. You may not get the same kind of commitment from the rest of the Big Ten. I know that's kind of a big picture overview, and I think you're right. Will Bolt can assemble a roster, but can he keep that roster together that's going to win, and how much support will he get to keep Nebraska baseball in that 40-plus win club?
They've got a good collection. They love junior college players because, the in-state high school guy, the 2 top high school guys are going to SEC schools. I mean, it's tough when you're competing. You don't have the advantage of the Big 12 in selling local players to stay because this is a really, really good state for high school baseball talent. And they now get out and play in prospects camps and perfect game. And so their exposure is a lot more. So LSU and Arkansas and Texas A&M are dropping offers. So Nebraska is really focused on the junior college. They've got some really good players coming on the mound and in the field. And so I think there's going to be some guys that are current starters that may not be starters next year. I think they can keep their roster together. I want to go back to something that after you watch how beautiful the stadium was in Stillwater, and you look at the support of the Nebraska fan base when it comes to baseball, and we're on 19 years since they won a regional. I have to caution people because I know it's like, wow, Oregon's coming. They're going to 2 straight supers. Look at what they're going to do for the league. UCLA, USC, and Washington haven't been very good. And you already know a conference that how they treat baseball. I wonder, after year 4, Will wins 40, gets back to the regional, is there going to be a renewed commitment to baseball? Because as we sit here, Nebraska is 7th in the Big Ten in spending, behind Iowa and Michigan. And there isn't a lot of money to be had right now at Nebraska. There are other things that are in front of Nebraska baseball. I do know that there are some former players and local business owners in Lincoln and Omaha that want to help Will out. So the NIL has gotten better, but you can't compete head-to-head with the SEC. So it'll be very curious on what is the commitment to Nebraska baseball from the athletic department. It may take Nebraska winning then to get money instead of we'll give you money that'll help you win.
So just like the program Will walked into with Van Horn, right? It was Buck before you got Haymarket. And you fast forward 25 years later, and you might be in the same situation. You've got a glorious ballpark, but it's a ballpark that I think if he had his way would update and add and tweak a little bit, correct?
Yeah, and it would be more for the players. Like They do want a pitching lab, and then they would like their clubhouse to be upgraded because they would like to be able to, on Selection Monday, sit in their clubhouse and have that shown live on TV. And people go, wow, that's a cool place. They actually don't really want that right now.
And I mean, one of the things you have to think about is even their current indoor facility they have at Haymarket Park was thanks in large part to a donation from a former player in Alex Gordon. That's how that got purchased. And that was going on 10 plus years ago now where that was finally finished up. But it took a donation from a former player to get that done, and that was 10 years ago.
Hey, Bill, how do we find – so looking at Oklahoma State, they got Boone Pickens, and they got this Mr. O'Bray. How come we can't get any gas and oil money in Nebraska?
I don't know, but it'd be nice to be able to find it, wouldn't it?
But
I'll tell you.
We don't have Nebraska Athletics doesn't have that one big booster. Dan Cook was that guy. He unfortunately has passed away, and he loved Nebraska Athletics. That's Cook Pavilion. And then the Hawks family has been super generous. But outside of that, there's nobody that's been like Nebraska's T. Boone Pickens. If you get
For all of Nebraska, you're talking about for Nebraska baseball.
Well, Nebraska baseball in particular, but also like as a whole, because Nebraska Athletics needs some money. I got some projects that, the funding you're scraping to find some funding to turn the faucet on.
You're having to go back to the same fishing hole. That's what you're doing.
Yeah, that's why they keep going back of, hey, Matt Rule, if you could win this year, that would really help us out.
Well, how do you get Uncle Warren to get Big Red Fever?
We spend his money so much. It is so much fun, but it's unfortunately play money. We've got all these ideas for Warren. He could drive to Lincoln and drive down in his Honda Accord, pull up and just drop $100 million and say, hey, whatever you guys want to do with this.
We'll get you some ice cream, Warren. Come on, man.
Can I quickly you mentioned the Cook family, Gary. Quickly, my dad accidentally totaled Dan Cook's widow's Mercedes. This was back whenever I was, I think, a senior in high school.
Wow, did not see that coming tonight.
Not either.
It wasn't his fault, to be fair. It was that
Cook trivia on the next Average Joe.
It was 27th Street. He was headed northbound on 27th Street. And there's Woodsdale Boulevard right there. She was leaving some dinner at the country club, and you have terrible lines of sight right there. So she pulled out in front of him, and he kind of T-boned her, and she got her Mercedes totaled. My dad got his truck totaled, and insurance took care of all of it. But yeah, quick little story.
So were you allowed in the Cook Pavilion then?
No.
His picture's up on the wall. Do not let this man pass.
No, but after they exchanged information and whatnot, my dad was like, I wonder what she does to get all that money for that nice car. And he went, oh.
Sorry.
Hey, how do we reverse this conversation about Nebraska and baseball where they're at right now? And we know that the move to the Big Ten probably impacted baseball about as much as anyone. How can we turn the conversation into, instead of, man, the Big Ten hurts Nebraska baseball, to, man, you can actually benefit from Nebraska being in the Big Ten in baseball. Can you have that conversation?
I don't know.
You can have that conversation, but you need to be the top dog and just go own the league. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's as simple as that. Yeah, you can keep scheduling RPI like Will did this year, but you need to just go on a run, become the forgotten baseball league dynasty, and just win out. It sounds simple, right? That's an easy answer, but that's it. I mean, you've got your 4 Pac-12s that, you're right, need to get better. That'll give you another team presumably on Selection Monday, but just be better than everybody else and kill your RPI opportunities, win your midweeks, and it'll take care of itself.
One thing
you can be a great squad in the bad league, but you got to win the league.
How good is the Big 12, though? I mean, Texas and Oklahoma leaving, Oklahoma State. I was so prepared to watch because I used to do Big 12 baseball, did the Big 12 championships and all that. I remember talking to Holiday about what they were going to do to build that stadium, and it was going to have he talked about building the baseball stadium like Matt Rule and Trev Alberts and all those who built the Nebraska football factory that just opened up, right? That's what Nebraska has with this football complex now is what Oklahoma State 10 years ago or 8 years ago was envisioning for its baseball field. Every possible bell, whistle, and toy you could have. And yet I watched that game today, and there's like 1,000 people maybe at that game. And you got bad weather in Oklahoma. I get it. But if you don't have any better support for Oklahoma State baseball the last 2 days in a regional situation at that beautiful ballpark, tell me what's the state of Big 12 baseball is. Okay, Kansas State's having a miracle run right now to get to a super regional. That's great. How much is that program going to sustain its success? I mean, that might be parallel to what Nebraska is doing, I think, but I think Nebraska's program is in better shape. But right now you've got the SEC, and with whatever's going to be left of the ACC in the next 6 months or 2 years, that's going to be like the Pac-12. It's basically the SEC and the Big Ten. If some Big Ten schools could get better, the spots are there for a team like Nebraska to invest a little and become a perennial regional team and get to a regional CWS. But I look at the Big 12 right now, and I think that is fool's gold in terms of being a dominant baseball conference like everybody thinks it is.
But what concerns me is not that the Big Ten is going to continue what it's being. My concern is that the SEC is going to grow to completely dominate the sport. With all the great schools down there, like the concern I have is Gary talked about the type of NIL resources these SEC schools have. I could potentially see this becoming a type of baseball landscape where everyone and their mother wants to go to the SEC. Every high school player in America wants to go play in the SEC, and there's not going to be that many roster spots available. So, yeah, Nebraska will end up with some talent, but you know what? You go play 2 strong years of baseball, and here comes an SEC team with money bags of NIL cash galore saying, hey, we want you for a run next year. You got 1 year left until you're MLB eligible. We're going to come in and offer you this much money. Envision how much it's going to be. I'm not even going to put a number on it, but we're going to give you this much money to come and play for us for a year as we try to make a College World Series run where some of the other conferences in America just become developmental leagues for the SEC. Like, yeah, you get 1 or 2 years out of this great player that you happen to get because there was no more room down in the SEC because it's such a good baseball conference. But hey, in year 3, whenever we need a ready-made starter at third base, we're going to come calling to Nebraska or to Oklahoma State or to whatever's left of the ACC and say, hey, we'll give you more than they can. We need a third baseman for a year, and then we'll let you go off to the MLB. That's kind of my concern, that even if you get good players at Nebraska, it's only going to be short-term because eventually there's going to be that SEC team that comes knocking.
I agree with you, Elijah. I'm watching Texas A&M the other night, and the 5-hole hitter, I'm like, gosh, his name sounds familiar. Look him up online. Yeah, he was at Michigan last year. Mm-hmm. You know, think he got some money to go from Ann Arbor to College Station?
Absolutely.
That's why in Nebraska's situation, you have to be a good bounce-back program. I think you can do well in the junior colleges, but you have to be a good bounce-back program from in-state guys. So when a kid goes to LSU because he's enamored with LSU but doesn't play right away, but he still wants to play college baseball, you're there for him to come back. You know, it's kind of, Max Anderson was supposed to go play for Rob Childress at Texas A&M. COVID hit. The roster shrunk. He had to look a place. Nebraska was still in the mix. There's players like that. It's just going to take – you're going to have to be very creative with your roster, but I also think even more so, because I'm going to use Kansas State as an example. Kansas State isn't just we got hot and now we're playing in a super. With Pete Hughes there as their head coach, they've been pretty good of late, and they should have made the tournament last year. They've invested in their facilities. Toynton Family Stadium is really, really nice down in Manhattan. They're really good in the dugout. They construct their roster well, but they're good in the dugout. It just shows you that Will, Rob, and whatever is left of the staff, because Mike Sirianni is up for the Arkansas State job, they're going to have to be really good out of the dugout. You're going to have to win a fair amount of games because of decisions you make along with your talent. So it's going to be – it's doable to get to the point where you can say, we're Nebraska baseball. We just happen to be located in middle America. Instead of we're Nebraska baseball, we play in the Big Ten. You just go, hey, we're Nebraska baseball, we play in Lincoln, Nebraska, and then go from there. If you can get to that point where that's what you're discussed about and you don't really bring up the Big Ten and its hindrances, you're just the program on your own that is housed in the Big Ten, then you're cooking with peanut oil.
Well, you're turning into what Wichita State used to be, right? I mean, they were in a league that maybe had a second or a third team that challenged, but Shockers were in Omaha forever and quite often, right? Turn into that Midwest hub for sure. That's Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt, the Average Joe Sports Show, the AJ Sports Pod. Give us a follow there. Like and subscribe on Twitter. And, of course, YouTube for the show. Spotify and iTunes will take reviews, good, bad, or ugly. Let us know what you think as we wind down baseball The guy I'm looking at, fellas, and we'll go around the horn here, a player that you're excited for. I'm going to say Ty Horn, and I saw a little bit of him this season, but I really liked what I saw in the 9th against Florida. Maybe I'm making too big a mountain out of a molehill moment, but love his stuff. I love mid-90s, love his aggressiveness, and if Coach Childress can keep doing his thing where a guy like McConaughey and Sears, as Sharpie is watching live college baseball, Horn's a guy I think we could be looking at as somebody in that Friday-Saturday mix next year.
Did LSU just do something? Is that what happened?
Yeah, so they're in the top of the 10th, and it's 3-3. There are 2 out. Guy hits a line drive to the wall in right field. It wasn't going to go out of the ballpark. It was probably a couple of feet from the wall, and the LSU right fielder didn't know whether to jump or he was kind of in between, and he completely fanned on it, and so it's a 2-out double for Carolina. There you go. There's the play-by-play. Sorry. I will say, because I think Nebraska has some intriguing arms for next year, and look at Rob Childress has got a track record. I will tell you a guy that Brett Sears, I thought kind of got tired towards the end of the year, but he had still good enough stuff that he was able to gut out things like Friday against Florida. Man, Mason McConaughey did not look like he wore down all season long. Here's a guy that struck out 91 in 73 innings. He started 11 games for you. He was your Saturday guy. He's your Friday guy. And I think Mason McConaughey is ready to take the next step. And he could just put up some monster numbers. And we could be looking at Nebraska has back-to-back Big Ten pitchers of the year.
And McConaughey is the one that I would target. I thought that what he was able to do the second half of the season for them, would he have 11 starts in all? Nebraska had 4 guys that made 10-plus starts, with Sears being the leader in that category. But for McConaughey to kind of emerge, it's really, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but kind of out of nowhere to have a 9-win campaign. I think right now, if you're Rob Childress, you go, okay, we have another guy that we can go into next season with that is our, like you say, our Friday guy. And hopefully he can duplicate what he did this year. He should have a ton of confidence off of that. I think that was really, really significant, the season that he had for him. If he doesn't do that, they probably don't make a regional.
It's fair.
Another name I want to add to this list, I'm looking towards some of the freshmen. There's a large freshman class that was brought in this season. We got to see some of them. I'll list off a couple names I'm excited for. It's not the Will Jeske. I think there's a reason they turned to him to come in pinch hitting situations so much. That might be your catcher next year should Josh Caron be on the way out, which I think we can assume he is following that Big Ten tournament. I think Jeske might be your starting catcher next year. We'll see. Case Sanderson, how could you forget about him? He had a great freshman season. But a guy that confused me as the year went on, I'm curious to see what type of jump he makes between freshman and sophomore year, because we've heard a lot of people say it across a lot of sports. Guys make the biggest jump they'll make in their college career between freshman and sophomore year. Tucker Timmerman. Timmerman was a guy early in the season we thought was going to be a dude out of the bullpen as a freshman. Came in some big moments early in the season, looked really good. And then as the year wore on, I'm not sure if it was a lack of confidence, if his arm just wasn't ready to take on as many appearances as he was getting throughout the year. Really faded late, and I don't even think we saw him once following about mid-April in this season. I was wondering what was going on behind the scenes with him, but I'm curious what type of jump he can make between year 1 and year 2, because I really liked what we saw from him early in the season.
No, Timmerman's a good name, for sure.
I mean, they're going to have some arms. I mean, Jalen Worthley could be the closer next year. Instead of going closer by committee, maybe they let Jalen be the back end of the bullpen. And, I think he can handle it. We've seen at times this year when he was asked to do that, he could. So there's a lot of optimism for 2025. They're gonna be active in the portal, and they might be active with in-state guys. I mean, a lot of Creighton good players are in the portal right now. So I think Nebraska will have some good additions. But look out, they've got that incoming class, as Elijah was kind of alluding to, along with the freshmen. And they got some guys coming. They did a really good job recruiting in last year's offseason.
And let me ask you this: Is Silva? I know Silva's a junior. Will he get drafted and go, or does he come back?
I think he comes back, and I tell you what, I would recruit over him.
I mean, the guys that I'm looking at leaving that are in the junior class this year, I mean, Swanson, with as hot as he was at the end of last season, we'll see what type of MLB looks he gets. I think Karen's pretty much a certainty to go. Yep. Other than that, I think you have a lot of guys that are going to be coming back. Did you see it? I mean, I've got the roster pull up in front of me, and for reference, if you're unaware, junior year is the first year. If you go to a 4-year institution, that's the first year you can get your name back into the MLB draft following your high school career. So that's the kind of time frame you look at. I mean, I look at Brockett as being a guy that's a junior that probably comes back. Christo comes back. McConaughey is only a sophomore, so he has to come back. I think Overbeek comes back. He said that in his post-game press conference following the loss to Florida. I'm not sure what type of MLB looks he'll get, but I don't think he's ready for that just yet. I mean, there's a lot of guys on that junior list that you're assuming are going to be coming back and played a lot of baseball this season. So there's high hopes for me for 2025, but especially when I look at the arms. Talked about Wordley. We talked about McConaughey. We talked about Timmerman. You can add some guys that picked up some steam late in the year in Christo and Brockett. There's going to be some options to turn to, assuming none of those guys end up going off to professional baseball.
Well, the reason I mentioned Silva is, and I agree with you, Gary. I think if he comes back, you put a little heat on him. He was such a threat coming into the season, and he hits about 260, 259, something like that on the season as a leadoff guy with that speed. If he wants to have a career beyond Nebraska, that he has to have a 290 season in that leadoff, if not north of 300. He can't be the leadoff guy with that kind of speed and hit 259. So I would, if I am Will Bolt, I'm saying you could be the guy next year, and you could make yourself a lot of money in professional baseball if you can just and not say just. That's 30 to 40 points higher. Mm-hmm. He has got to hit the ball at 290 plus with that kind of speed in a leadoff position. And for him to be hitting 259 or 260 is unacceptable with what he could have done for that team. And I know he stole a lot of bases, and I know he set the table when he got on there, and he covered a lot of territory in center field, but 260 with that just does not cut it.
He'll need to get back in the cage and up that number for sure. Let's talk a little football as it is summer camp season. Nebraska trying to replicate, guys, what they did last June with getting their verbal commits. Nebraska out to a number of kids. Got Jones, of course, at West Side. Hot race for him. Nebraska down in Texas, at some of the satellite camps. And Big Red going to be hosting a slew of guys. Sharpie, you're kind of the recruiting expert, my friend. Do you like the attack of Matt Rule with what he's done and how he's turned, I guess, to his recruiting plan for Nebraska? It worked last year. You saw some young guys perform. They're going to try and do it again with adding to the 8 they already have this 2025 class.
I think, they've had success off a 5-7 season, and that says a lot. They've got a lot of interest. They've got guys that are coming, and June has turned into the month for recruiting. And Nebraska's at 8 right now. I think Dawson Merritt is one to watch, the linebacker from Kansas City, who Nebraska's made up a lot of ground, and I like where Nebraska's at with him. He's going to go to Alabama this weekend, and it's been Alabama or Nebraska, but Nebraska's in a really good spot, in my opinion. And if you can add Christian Jones from Westside, who's going to make his official visit the following weekend, June 14th, if that's your linebackers for 2025, that's pretty impressive. I expect them to have a busy month of June. They have a really organized effort, and they've gotten in front of a lot of prospects, and they've got a lot of interest, and they're using a lot of peer recruiting. So I expect the month of June to be very productive for them again. But that's where I'm looking. If they can fill linebacker with those two in this month of June, Merritt's going to decide before the month of June is over. I'm not sure about Christian, but if they can add those two guys, that is a great, great addition on the defensive side of the ball. But they need offensive linemen. They need offensive linemen. And I don't know, guys. I mean, I've been following recruiting for a long time, and it's really shifted where high school football recruiting is important. It still is important. It will always be important. But the attention, I think, has waned a little bit because of the portal. people get more excited about what might be in the portal, what you could get that is ready-made a little bit compared to what you can do in high school. But Nebraska doesn't think that way. For Nebraska to be successful, they have to be very good in the high school recruiting ranks. And they've cast a wide net from not only the 500-mile radius, but they're down in the places where they know the people in Texas and Florida. And I think you'll see a good month of June.
One thing, too, with that ready-made, it's nice to go pick up a roster addition that's got 50 starts, 40 starts, 30 starts under their belt. But for what they want to do on the lines of scrimmage, offensively and defensively, it is going to take that high school recruitment to get that kid in, to get a position group in, have them work together for a year or two, get them developed, then get them ready to go perform. And that's easier said than done. And keep them engaged and interested so they stick around so you can develop them. And I think Rule's done a good job of being able to make contact with kids and then develop that relationship. I think the kids that are in Lincoln, I call them kids, but they enjoy their position coaches. I mean, they like Coach Donnie. They like pot roast. I mean, it's a win when you're going to work off season or during season, playing for a guy that you really respect. And you've seen some work on the field. I mean, you saw that defensive line really thrive with a first-year guy last year. So I think the reputation is out on both of Nebraska's lines of scrimmage coaches. And it's not just, wow, that guy's pretty good to get connected with. It's, hey, he'll turn me into a hell of a good football player.
Are you saying they didn't have that in the Diaco days?
I don't know that Dirty Bob or Disco Bob knew everyone's name. But thank you for making his name come up at 41 past. If you had that in the office pool, Bill will buy you a shot of tequila.
Here's what I hope is not a negative for Nebraska, and that is, I'm sure that other places are utilizing it against the two linebackers. How long is Tony White going to be at Nebraska? How long is Terrence Knighton going to be at Nebraska? Rob Dvorak, you don't hear his name all that much.
He's done a great job, though.
But you hear about White and you hear about Knighton, and so if you're recruiting heavily, defensive players, are they recruiting on that relationship and what those guys have done to develop and be a part of what's going on, and prominently? I mean, those are the two names that are talked about the most, especially in terms of relationship and the prospects for the future. So if those linebackers are saying, I don't know how much longer those guys are going to be around, so I'm going to look elsewhere.
That's fair. I think they are very honest with the recruits that ask that question, that, there's going to be interest in Coach White if Nebraska has another successful year. And, he made no bones that he'd like to be a head coach. But I think what they're telling recruits is, for right now, he is here. And if he's not here, trust us, we have a plan in place. And it kind of feels like it's Rob Dvorak. So I think they just like Rule is, and Rule has turned into one of the greatest PR head coaches that the University of Nebraska Lincoln has ever had in any sport, because he's very open and transparent. I think they are exactly the same way on the recruiting trail.
They seem to be pretty upfront with what their message is. And, yeah, I mean, there's got to be a succession plan, don't they? Have to have one? They do.
Yeah.
And that's probably been communicated or inferred.
And as we, I assume, wrap this conversation here on recruiting, can I ask the question, can we set a prediction now, an over-under totaler of how many recruits Nebraska has 1 month from today, whenever the 4th of July rolls around, camp season is done? How many commits are in the boat? It stands at 8 right now. If you remember last year, June was a busy month last year for picking up guys and really filling out that
12
class.
of them.
How many do you think it is this time around?
I'll say 14.
I'm going to double it. I'm going to say 16, because I think now that building is done and they've got a little momentum with despite 5-7, the messaging has been consistent for a year and a half now, and Rule's reputation. And I wouldn't doubt if there are a couple of 5-stars that are in that those 16.
I'm going to go Price is Right in the middle, 15.
Well, I'm going to Price Right. $1. They're going to lose 7. Won't go over. But in all seriousness, you guys kind of hit the nail on the head. I see it being at least 4 or 5. Probably a max of, as Bill said, about 8. I think you're all probably in that range, but just to be unique, I guess I'll go 13.
Okay, lucky 13.
We'll see.
Well, it is the end of the sports season for Nebraska Athletics. Average Joe Sports Show at the AJ Sports Pod. Follow that on Twitter. Like and subscribe on YouTube, the Average Joe Sports Show, Spotify, iTunes. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Well, we're going to hand out the Above Average Joe Awards.
Congratulations to one and all.
or the Joeys, and go around the room with who we have as male and female athlete of the year, male and female team of the year, and we can also go with moment of the year when it comes to all of Nebraska athletics. And my female athlete, all first team Big Ten, and I've enjoyed watching and covering Alexis Markowski for a lot of years. And she just continues to do work down in the paint for Nebraska. And that's my pick. I know there's other options. There's other team options. But I'm going to jump into the deep end of the pool first. Alexis can touch down there. I can't. And I'm going to go with Markowski as my choice.
I will go, there's a lot of great options. I mean, once again, Nebraska Athletics on the female side had another banger of a year. Eleanor Dale from soccer.
Okay.
John Walker.
Well, I got to change mine. We can't have.
Oh, no, we can. Hey, she can get 2 because she led Nebraska soccer to one of their best seasons ever.
Okay.
I mean, she was a dominant player in the Big Ten this year. She was the forward of the year, and she would get my vote as the female athlete of the year.
Okay. Bill,
I
you
wholeheartedly
that motion?
agree. I wholeheartedly agree with Eleanor Dale, but I'm gonna throw another name out there then just because, and I don't know which one to throw out. I was gonna say Jazz Shelley because I think coming back to Nebraska was a big deal for her for the program this year to get to the NCAA tournament. But I think Merritt Beeson's presence with that Nebraska volleyball team, as great as the year was, and as much as everybody loves Lexi Rodriguez and all of that, there is just some maturity about Merritt Beeson that makes her one of the most unique athletes I have ever seen at Nebraska. And the way she does an interview and the way she handles herself and represents the program and the whole department, I think she is a phenomenal representative. But Eleanor Dale was my first pick, but I'm going to throw Merritt Beeson out there in Jazz Shelley.
Well, how about an athlete that was talked about more than anyone else? Harper Murray. Just kidding. That's in poor taste, maybe. If we're going fully serious, I think I'm going to give some love to the softball team. It wasn't the year that they wanted, but Billie Andrews, really, really good year at shortstop. Another All-American season. She was a team captain, and things didn't always go their way this season. Whenever you think about Jordy Ball going down, and they're still a really good Big Ten team, but their season didn't end the way they wanted it to. She still quietly had a really, really good season, one of the best in the Big Ten. So I'll go with Billie Andrews and give the softball team a little love.
Okay.
All-time home run leader, too.
Yep.
Men's. I'm going to go with Brett Sears. That's my call. Pitcher of the year for sure, but just that tone setter on Friday nights. Nebraska needed some monster performances, and he got them. And even if he didn't get the win, which was rare, he got him far enough along to be in position to do some big things. So probably obvious, but I'm going with Sears.
I'm with you. I'm with you, man. A Friday night guy in college baseball. Nebraska's been searching for one of those, and they got it this year. And I would add my vote for Brett Sears as well.
Billy D.
All right, I'm throwing you a curveball, pun intended. Ty Robinson.
Ooh.
Okay.
It wasn't exactly Jordan-esque sending a fax like he did by saying, "I'm back."
Okay, good.
But Ty Robinson's, he was great on the field in that defense. All right. But his decision to come back because he wants to be a part of what's going on in Nebraska and take him up on the developmental thing. Now, look, I think he could have been a second or third round draft pick this year, but him believing in whatever it is that Matt Rule is selling to develop himself and do what I would say he'll be a first round pick next year, but to send the message to his teammates, to the department, to recruits, whoever comes on campus, and they go, that guy right there could have gone to the NFL, and he wanted to come back to be a part of what we're doing here. And I think that is a significant, maybe one of the most significant things that happened to Nebraska football in 2023 was his decision to come back for 2024.
And now we're to me, and I feel like I'm the guy at the end of the first round of a fantasy football draft that said, how did I just look my way into Christian McCaffrey? No one wanted to throw Keisei Tominaga's name out there?
Well, I did, but come on, that's obvious.
It's a little obvious, and I have a less than obvious.
On him.
I had a backup answer ready to go because I assumed someone else would have said Keisei, but Keisei had Nebraska talked about on a national scene. I think more than anybody else, what he did against Indiana in the Big Ten tournament. I know the season didn't end the way Husker basketball wanted to. We talked about that a lot, but people were talking about Nebraska and Nebraska basketball specifically, which is the team that doesn't get talked about much because of one guy. That one guy was Keisei Tominaga, and every single time he stepped foot on the floor, it was absolutely electric. So that's my number one choice. My backup option, because I thought he was going to be taken by now, was going to be Peyton Robb, Husker Wrestling, who
that's a great story.
Battled his way back from MRSA last season and was battling for an NCAA title. Almost lost his leg near death, and he comes back and wrestles another year for Husker Wrestling and quietly had a very, very good season for what has become a juggernaut of a program under Mark Manning. Peyton Robb was going to be my backup answer, and I feel like the guy at the back end of the first round of a fantasy draft, again, that just had a world of options at his fingers. So I want to make sure both of those guys are accounted for here in Male Student Athlete of the Year.
All right. Since you picked last, you now pick first in true fantasy football draft mode. So, team of the year, men's team of the year.
Men's team of the year. That one's
Wrestling,
really tough.
Basketball, baseball.
I'm between the two winter sports teams because Husker basketball will make it to an NCAA tournament after some years of turmoil under Fred Hoiberg and a lot of doubts about his ability to run the basketball program. That's a great option. Mark Manning, I think, gets slighted a little bit just because of, as I said earlier, the juggernaut that he has built. That going through and competing for a Big Ten title and sending guys off to an NCAA championship. That's just what he does. That's what they do. But it was quietly a very, very good year for Husker Wrestling and some awesome moments with Nashkin to get out there on the wrestling mat. So with that in mind, I think I'm going to go with Husker Wrestling. I don't think I should slight them because of the dominance that they have had at Nebraska for going on 20 years now under Mark Manning. So Husker Wrestling is my pick for the team of the year.
Okay. Sharpie.
There's a lot of good candidates that have been mentioned. I'm going to add a new one to this because they were dominant once again. Men's track and field won the Big Ten Outdoor for the second straight year, 4 times since 2013. They're trying to complete the track, which is one of the priorities of Troy Dannon, is get that track on the Innovation Campus finished. But while they are working out on a unfinished track stadium, they are dominant, and they're the only thing that's still going with track and field. NCAA still coming up, so I will go men's track and field.
Billy D.
Well, I guess I lucked into the back end of the draft to be able to say Nebraska men's gymnastics finishing 4th at the NCAA championships. That's an honorable mention. What Fred Hoiberg did to keep that team. Not together, but just to keep it so relevant for so long and to get to the NCAA tournament. And I mean, they battled and they finally got some road wins, toward the end of the year. Well, that was the most fun Nebraska basketball season probably since 1996 or, Tim's team in 2014. But, good on Fred Hoiberg, Big Ten Coach of the Year, sharing great moments at PBA. Look, you got to celebrate that season.
I'm gonna second the men's basketball Female team of the year, Sharpie?
I go to Nebraska volleyball.
Is it unanimous with volleyball?
It's volleyball for me.
Yeah.
I'm going soccer.
Ooh,
Okay.
okay.
Elite Eight, John Walker, that dude, he's been there since day one with Nebraska soccer. Never had another coach. And just, he's very much like a Terry Pettit in that he is such a cerebral intellectual, the way he approaches his game. And to get that team, look, will they repeat, is this sustained success? I don't know. But to have that magical run to the Elite Eight, and, they probably could have been in the, what do they call it? The whatever the four are, cup, the college cup. So I'm a big fan of John Walker for sticking around and having a season like that.
Moment of the year as we say goodbye.
Wait. What was your women's team of the year? Was it volleyball?
Yeah, I went volleyball.
Okay.
Yeah. No, Bill was the scent, which is fine. It's all good. So we look at moment of the year, and does it come down?
Oh, jeez.
To what? It comes down to Big Ten postseason baseball championship, the dog pile, just a little over a week ago. Comes down to volleyball day that the world celebrated at Memorial Stadium. For John Cook.
Another volleyball moment to add to that would be taking down Wisconsin at home when you get the moment of John Cook in the cowboy hat after the game.
That was good. Ride him cowboy. Yeah, he's got a good looking several cowboy hats. And you also, of course, have the Purdue court storming. Nebraska knocks off number one. Those are three pretty cool discussion points. I'm going to say give me Purdue. I've watched a lot of basketball, section B to Vandy Center with my family. We flip coins to see who got to draft what tickets for my brother and I. And I always got KU and Roy, which was great. So I'm going to go with that win over Purdue. They just throttled them. Incredibly just moment where everyone's partying. Second was that Wisconsin moment. The comeback against Wisconsin was great where you kind of broke the Badgers. But I'm going to stick with Purdue and Nebraska. Sharpie, you're up.
All four of those are fantastic, and I happen to be in attendance for all four. God, that Purdue game, Schmidt, I'm there with you. I think the Purdue game at PBA when they blew out Purdue, who is ranked number one, to me is the moment of the year. Slightly ahead of some of the ones we mentioned and the Superstars performance at halftime of the great Nebraska.
Bill and I were sitting next to each other for that halftime performance, and I think we both thought somebody may have slipped us something in the first half.
Billy D.
Wow. Sharpie may have trumped Diaco. Gosh, I mean, I'm writing it down.
The clogger's busy.
Or Red Panda. Look, I can't get it down to one, and a couple of mine are off the court. Dylan Raiola committing to Nebraska.
Oh.
I mean,
wow,
that whole flipping of the script. That was December, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, look, I was at I got a call to meet a football recruit at the journalism college one afternoon. And so to be a part of all that was pretty unique to know what was kind of going down. But that, and then the Trev Alberts day of
I stayed and you went positive with Dylan,
but I'm just saying, I mean, you're talking about moments. The moment of, hey, Dylan Raiola might flip. This might happen. And then for however many days that went on, I don't remember, it was maybe a week or two. Maybe it's more than that even. But when he made the decision to come to Nebraska, I mean, that's up there with Ty Robinson deciding to stick around, right? But then the day that waking up, Schmidt, I think, sent me the text that Trev Alberts was talking to Texas A&M, and that 12-hour period. Yeah. Sharpie, you were probably on the air when that was all going down early in the morning. And then by 5 or 6 o'clock that night, he's on his way to College Station. And then a week later, or less than a week later, Dennis LeBlanc, one of the greatest athletic directors Nebraska's ever had, hires.
That's a good call.
I mean, it's just to me, just those two news cycles will stand out forever. But in terms of on the court, Jazz Shelley's 3-pointer to help beat Iowa, and Caitlin Clark at PBA, and that nationally televised game on Super Bowl Sunday, one of the great moments for Nebraska women's basketball history too.
Holy cow.
What this points out, what a year in Nebraska athletics.
The more we talk, we let off the show with some thoughts, and now we're closing it. Wow. A lot happened this year.
Elijah, you got an exclamation point?
We're at this point, and we haven't even talked about Volleyball Day in Nebraska in terms of moment of the year. To get 90,000 plus, to set a record that will likely never again be broken at Memorial Stadium in terms of attendance for volleyball is something that no one else in the country would be able to do. I mean, it's leading off ESPN. Here's Volleyball Day in Nebraska, where you get 90,000 packed in. It's hard to skip over that one, but I also think about on a Husker game day in Nebraska, the football team was not the main event. It was Husker volleyball against Wisconsin that night. I mean, I remember being downtown and the people that were packed into bars and places because they couldn't get into the Bob Devaney Sports Center that night. So they're packed around at Barry's and in the rail yard, at Brewski's and everywhere. I'm just giving everyone some free shout outs right now. They're packed around the TV cheering on Husker volleyball in unison. That was like something I hadn't experienced before, where the Husker football team was the appetizer to the entree, the main event of Husker volleyball. That was also super different, and it deserves a good shout here, but I'm going to go with Volleyball Day in Nebraska being my moment of the year. It's how it started the year, and it set the table right.
I can't believe you're disrespecting the Northwestern game that was played before that Wisconsin volleyball match.
As you look back, which moment do you remember more? Is it Husker volleyball or Nebraska and Northwestern?
Well, I remember the Northwestern kicker after he made a field goal was milking the cow.
Yeah, he was.
We hope.
Good point.
We absolutely hope. Now, on that note, that was the first ever Joey's, the Above Average Joe Sports Show Awards.
Hey, can I give him an honorable mention to somebody? Look, and I know he had a horrible last appearance as a Husker, but, doggone it, I love Kyle Perry. The guy's been around forever.
So's Florida.
And I had him in a couple classes, got to know him really well, and I hate him for what happened in his last outing as a Husker. But you talk about somebody who deserves to be above average Joeist for at least a little while.
Okay.
And the emotional scene in the locker room, saying goodbye and finally, ending his career. I love the guy, and he's a good Husker.
That's cool. That's well put. Sharpie will check in again. Bill Doleman, Billy D will say hi next week, and Elijah will keep rolling. And this has been episode 43 of the Average Joe Sports Show.
And before we get out, I'd like to encourage everybody, if there's any moments we missed, any student athletes we missed, drop them in the comments on our YouTube video, and maybe we can see any revisions. I think we got all of them.
I think
we're not perfect.
Santa's list of moments.
If there's anything that stands out in your mind that you think we missed, drop in the comments. Let us know. Maybe we'll get to it next episode.
All right. We'll talk to you next time on the Average Joe Sports Show. Thanks.